Welcome
Hello, hello.
to the Forum Collective Fundraiser. The Forum Collective presents a fundraiser, which I wrote originally as a joke, and I was like, surely somebody will tell me not to name this event this, and they were like, nope, it's fine. And I was like, okay, sure, why not? So, this is the other part of the evening where Ryan and I are gonna like jib jab, gib gab about a little bit about our process and also creating one of the episodes that some of you may have seen in the gallery called Fever. Um, and then also we're going to like chat. If you have stuff to say or to add, please do. And yeah, but I think that it was important for the forum members to kind of have a discussion, not just about this topic, about Black and Asian empowerment, especially like in this political and social time. Um, but also it was really important for us to just like have you guys see an actual conversation that's kind of informed by our process and informed by folks who aren't here, and we'll talk about them. um, the one thing that I will say is that if you have a question, just press 5 or if you like want to say something, like press like one of these reactions, and then I'll just like call on you. And also, if you want to stay silent, you can like totally stay silent. It's only going to be like a 20-minute conversation, and then we're all going to head back, I'm going to guess, to the foyer. Who knows? But Kieran will tell us, because in this space, I don't want to say Kieran is God because I don't want to lift them up like that. But they did create the world that we're living in right now. They designed it.
They
So
created the
technically,
world.
yeah, we're just living in it. We're all a collective Kieran. Don't tell them that I said that. So, yeah, for those of you who don't know, um, man, this is I hate talking about this, but especially in the Bay Area, we've seen a I would say a spike in anti-Asian uh, attacks. You know, there's no other word to put it. Um, it's interesting because Ryan and I, when people started to like really take notice of the attacks that have been happening recently all across the country, a lot of people, including our colleagues and friends, started to talk about this, which is like basically how do we protect Asian and Pacific Islanders, and also how do we um, when there is an attack on a specific group of folks who aren't black, how do we like integrate that discussion of like racism, like the multifaceted nature of like what racism is and how it affects us. But it was kind of weird because Ryan and I turned to each other, and we had been talking about the attacks that have been happening and the rise of anti-Asian sentiment since the beginning of the pandemic. Because even when the former president, yeah, the former president,
Thank God.
kind of blamed China for COVID. And then it started to circulate through the public sphere. And then we started to like see what we've seen actually throughout history, which is that Asian folks, especially in America, basically get blamed for a slew of problems. So it was interesting for me and Ryan to kind of figure out, oh, we're just going to have a conversation between two mixed Asian folks about anti-Asian racism, because Sandy, hey, um, because we've been talking about this, and we even created a piece from our web series Ether called Fever, where we talked about this specific issue. We talked about like what it means to be Asian American or Pacific Islander, and then also have the same type of fear walking outside as you are if you are a black person or a queer person or a trans person, and then you kind of like have that fear of walking outside. So I want to like give it to Ryan. I just want to contextualize what we're talking about. but I also wanted to give it to Ryan to ask, like, or to shed light, or to tell y'all like how we came up with the idea, and also like what it meant to create work, like artistic work, about this issue, and then to kind of like literally in a year circle back to the same issue that we've been at least we personally have been talking about since the beginning of the pandemic. So I just wanted to like let Ryan speak.
Yeah, thanks, Julius. Yeah, it's such a vexing subject to talk about, to live, to experience, and to then make art about. But it is kind of quintessentially American in so many ways. I don't even know where to start, really. Just that when things like this happen, there's a lot of talk, a lot of talk. Everybody wants to talk, just kind of like what we're doing right now. But everybody's like, well, we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it. We need to talk about it. Very little is done. And then, the cycle kind of repeats. Of course, there's lots that can be done. And I think that what we here at the forum, we did what we do best, and that is to analyze the topic, to hear and record stories regarding the topic, and then to create the art. And that experience was incredibly moving for me, especially. It was very personal, because we started at the beginning of the pandemic. Because at the beginning of the pandemic, as Julius mentioned, there was an uptick in anti-Asian racism due to the perceived notion that China was purposefully spreading the virus. Now, as Julius also mentioned, this type of thing is not without precedent. Asian Americans are often blamed for America's economic problems, public health problems. Whenever something like this occurs, it's often, Asian Americans get targeted for blame. I mean, so while I say that there was an uptick, it's also nothing new, right? It's nothing new for Asian Americans. We are often targeted for, often blamed for these large scale global things, but then we're also targeted because we're perceived as being easy targets, as being, sort of the model minority or the invisible minority, and therefore, people won't get in trouble if they attack Asian Americans. So, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was this fear of going outside. So not only fear of going outside because of the virus, but a fear of going outside because of being Asian. But this was sort of interesting to analyze, because as Asian Americans, what we have as one of the smaller minorities in this country and one of the most overlooked minorities in this country, we have this very interesting complex where we desire to be seen. There is this like very large desire within us to be seen and to be heard and to be accepted in this country. And so there was that very interesting dichotomy of like wanting to be seen and yet wanting to hide at the same exact time. And so actually, when we first started creating the piece, creating Fever, I was throwing around ideas, and one of the first ideas I had was an Asian American person in his apartment getting ready to go out and talking about how much he wanted to be seen and how he hates being seen as invisible or being perceived as invisible or rendered invisible by America. But as he's talking, he's getting ready to go outside and he's putting on a mask and gloves and a hat and sunglasses and scarf and everything to like hide and to protect himself from the virus, and then opening the door and then kind of glancing out and being like, looking for anybody, if anybody's coming, if they see somebody coming, run and hide. So there were a lot of issues, of course, to delve into, but the piece really came to life after a handful of interviews that Julius performed with a handful of local Asian American, actually people who work in the field of psychotherapy, uh, and some folks who are activists as well, Asian American activists and progressive therapists. Their testimony highlighted so many more issues as well. And then Sharon Shao, who's a very talented actress, she and I put our heads together and we exercised our own demons and brought our own feelings to the piece itself, and it really started to take shape from there. I guess one of the things that was then interesting is that, like, after we released it, and just in the past month, there was another spike in anti-Asian racism and harassment and assault on the streets of San Francisco, Oakland, and New York, Boston, all over the place. There have been more attacks, even more and more attacks. Some of them based on COVID, and some of them seemingly random. But again, it's this notion that Asian Americans are either to blame for a virus or for an economic downturn, or they are simply targeted because they are easy pickings. And so this is a lot of the response to this was like, oh, well, Asian Americans and African Americans need to unite, need to come together, and need to, the two communities need to unite. And everybody likes to say that. Nobody really knows what that means. But what I think that one of the things that was so special about Fever was that it wasn't just me and Sharon in a room talking about these issues. It was actually Asian Americans and African Americans collaborating on this piece through the journalism piece and the theatrical performance piece together. We synthesized these experiences and this knowledge together to create a brand new piece together. And that was extremely rewarding. And I think it built a lot of bridges in the meantime. Julius, I feel like I've been talking for too long. Maybe we should.
No, it's okay. Because you bring up a lot of points that I kind of wanted to share with folks, and I wanted to ask of you, but also of everybody in the room. Because when the first thing for folks just joining us, if you can turn off your video if you don't want to be like shown, also that. If you have a question or a comment, or if you're like, hey, I either want to say something, or Julius and Ryan are like missing something, you can totally like tell us either in the chat, or you can click 5 and a little question mark will show above you and we'll just call on you. And so before, so that, but then also when Ryan was talking about that the process was multicultural, I am Black and Filipino, for those of you who don't know, and I did the research that Ryan was talking about, and I wrote the article that's available on our website, and it was edited by a friend and colleague, Kyle Pissard, who is African American. And I think that it was interesting because Kyle and I just came at it as like researchers and journalists. But when we started to like learn more about the cyclical history of anti-Asian sentiment in America, that it's like, oh, Asians come into the country as immigrants and then they get immediately attacked for being like a representation, honestly, of a virus. And 9 times out of 10, they're attacked. The idea of the Asian American Pacific Islander body is attacking whiteness, white supremacy, everybody drink. So I think that what was interesting about all of the people who I interviewed, like Ryan said, I interviewed Dr. Vicky Chang, psychologist. I interviewed Lauren Ito, who's a poet and an activist. I interviewed Dr. Connie One from AAPI Women Lead. I interviewed Dr. Jean Tolentino, who's a psychotherapist in the area. I interviewed these incredible activists, people who are really investing their time into AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander, health and mental health and community health. And every single one of them noted that when Asian bodies step inside of the race discussion in America, they're stepping inside of the black-white binary. And so I think what was another really deep like cut was that as opposed to just like throwing around words of like racism and white supremacy, what each person talked about was that what we're seeing is like not a discussion, but we're seeing anti-blackness on top of people trying to navigate white supremacy. So a question for everybody and a question for Ryan right now is like, how do we see other folks and other minorities or other people or other whomever step into the American black-white binary, which is defined by anti-blackness? Because I know that personally, especially being half Filipino, like I'm always, when we talk about like Asian, like the idea of the Asian body, 9 times out of 10 discussions completely throw out Southeast Asians, Pacific Islanders, and Indigenous folks. And 9 times out of 10, especially in California, like Indigenous folks, Filipino folks, and Southeast Asians actually have been affected by COVID more than a lot of other groups, especially those who work in healthcare. So even that, even that thing, do you know what I mean? Where it's like, on the face of it, you know, even this discussion, it's like, okay, this is a discussion about Black and Asian empowerment, and Ryan is, if I may, like Ryan is East Asian, and I'm Black presenting, and unless you know me, most people wouldn't necessarily realize that I'm half Filipino. So I guess it's just a question for like, of course, everybody, if you're just like, I don't agree with that, or like you're missing a point, or I have something to say. But also I just want to ask Ryan, like how you see either Asian folks or East Asian folks step into this black-white binary of America, and how you see Asian folks, from your own experience, like kind of deal with anti-Blackness.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, I mean, we could be here all night. It's such a, I mean, it's so crazy. It's such a complicated subject, but basically, you know, we walk into the whole black-white binary with all kinds of our own issues. And we bring all of these issues into play. And then that just, you know, it's like, I mean, really, like we literally, like we come from a different land with colorization issues already, with notions of hierarchy based on meritocracy already, based on not necessarily religion, but like this Confucian idea of like, well, there's always going to be people at the top and always people at the bottom, and where do you fit in? And so we bring this is like ingrained in our culture. It is even programmed into our language. In so many Asian cultures, you speak up or you speak down to people. You either, based on where they are in the hierarchy, you either address them as a polite form because they are higher than you, or you address them impolitely because they're lower than you. That is literally how you just talk. That's just how we talk, right? And so we bring all of that into, and we step into America into this black-white binary, and we look and we say, okay, well, who's in power? Who's at the top? Well, we have to like adhere to them and adhere to their rules or whatever it is. It's like there's this built-in sort of notion of hierarchy in our minds based on meritocracy, and we love our meritocracy. And then there's the colorization of it as well, right? We already look down on people who have darker skin. It's not necessarily based on specifically African skin versus European skin. It is literally just like, the darker you are, the more we see you as someone who works in the fields or whatever it is. And it is like, it's this whole, it brings its own hierarchy with it too. So it's so complicated. And then we encounter this dynamic, this black-white dynamic that has been in play for hundreds of years before we even got here. And it's complex in its own right. And we don't understand it. And y'all don't understand us, and it just becomes this big mess, as we all know. So I don't know how to solve it. I don't know what exactly is, if there is some kind of cure, but basically what needs to happen is we need to I always come back to creating. We need to create together. We need to go through things together, experience things together. And this piece again was that, and this was exactly what the type of thing that needs to happen. People come closer together when they experience things together. So going through an experience together, creating something together is an experience. That is my hope for multicultural solidarity. I'm hoping that more people in both of these communities will do that going forward, will interact, collaborate, and go through things together, experience things together, whether they be good or bad. Just to give you a little bit of background between Julius and I, we became close because we experienced we went through creative experiences together. We created work together. We didn't know each other very well before, and then we wrote a play together, and then it was a very difficult experience, and that brought us closer together. So I would love to ask you, Julius, like, what are you hopeful for in terms of the future, moving forward, in terms of, I don't know, breaking down these barriers or just creating new things? What are you hopeful for?
Man, I'm hopeful for like spaces like this, honestly, because yes, this is an artistic space, but at the same time, like most of the people around me are like friends and loved ones, and people that I've hung out with before, people that I've talked to before, people that I've grown up with before, in the youth. So it's for me, when I'm hopeful when, how do I say this? I'm not trying to like push our philosophy on everybody. I have to say that me getting training as a journalist made me ask deeper questions, and then that made me a better person. Because some people were like, oh, it's kind of like interesting and really cool that you ended up doing theater. And I was like, really? Because this is the final step of like what I've been doing for many years. I learned how to like ask deeper questions. I learned how to research like what I knew in front of me. I learned how to contextualize it. I learned how to like bring other people into the fold. And even the fact I was talking to somebody, and I was like, oh, I'm kind of getting more into like facilitation or like bringing people together in discussions. And it's not really like theater per se or art per se. She was like, no, actually, it's kind of like live theater when you facilitate a discussion. So I'm just like, even it's weird and kind of like making me a little bit verklempt right now. But I'm just like, if you even look at the map of everybody on the space, I'm just like, this is an interactive play. Why can't it not be? We're all in the same space together. We're all doing the same thing. And we're talking about something that's necessary to like our livelihood. So So when you're like, what do you hope for the future? I know, and you know, and we all know that like change is incremental, which is like the most bullshit thing in the world. That is true. But the fact that we can like push the needle, not like far, but like little by little. The fact that like
Yeah.
in theory, everybody inside of this room just seen an experience of two people who like came together and then just pushed the needle simply by talking
Mhm.
and creating a safe space for people to talk. And of course, like I agree with what Ryan said earlier that people like talk, 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 talk. And there's actually so many things that you could actually do to like
Mhm.
make sure that Black folks, darker skinned folks, and Asian folks, whomever, are safe. Like there are so many things that you could
Mhm.
do actively. You can like we can divest money, we can talk about like that thing. We can be here for another hour. But I think that inside of spaces with specifically family and friends and colleagues who just don't know yet, like trying to figure out how to facilitate those discussions, that's what I'm hopeful for. Because I'm just like, I can do it, and you can do it, and
Mhm.
everybody in this room can do it. So if all of us can do it, then it can just kind of reverberate outside of us, kind of like that pay it forward thing, like over and over and over again. So
Mhm.
that's kind of what I'm most hopeful for the future is that we use our connections to actually just ask deeper questions. And then we use that as a base for social change. So,
Nice.
white
Yeah.
supremacy, everybody drink. So,
Yeah, I think I want to just say that you don't have to be a journalist to ask questions. I think that's really important. That's fantastic. And they say, uh, well, I mean, curiosity is incredibly powerful. I mean, any therapist will tell you that being curious with anybody, with somebody you meet, or being curious with someone, with a friend or with a partner or with a colleague, or being curious with your own self, being curious about your own thoughts and feelings and emotions, asking questions actually brings you closer. I think it brings you closer.
yeah,
It really, curiosity is key. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
And with that, I kind of want to have anybody like ask us questions if you want to. If you don't want to, obviously there's only like 15 of us in this room. Like you totally do not. But I don't, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like for everybody. But like if you also just like want to ask like me or Ryan questions, like we're always down to like talk more. But we're ending like the end of our events. I'm noticing. So I think that either Kieran and or Lee are going to come. Oh, there it is. There they are. Kieran and or Lee might come and like kind of close us out, and like talk about our auction items and all this stuff and blah this, blah that. But also before we do that, I just really want to say thank you. I've actually been made fun of by the forum team for saying thank you like a lot, but I really have to say thank you. Thank you to like our friends who are like volunteers helping us today. Thank you to like everybody who's donated so far. Thank you for just like coming and like sharing some space with us because we know
Yes.
like the forum and everywhere it's like um, the more comfortable that people are to like dive into those really hard topics, the easier the whole actually world is. So yeah, I just want to say thank you, and I'm gonna step off this chair, and I think that Kieran might like have some other stuff for y'all. Okay, so thank you.